All right. Packard Brown and I are meeting today to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and benefits for pastors who are bivocational. Packard is a career coach, author, and speaker on the topic of bivocational ministry. He served as Director for Career Services at Iliff School of Theology, as well as serving several years in the corporate sector as an executive search agent. He has coached hundreds of students and bivocational pastors about their career pursuits. He has shared his expertise on the bivocational model of ministry in a number of settings, including presentations at student administrators conferences hosted by the Association of Theological Schools, teaching seminary level classes, and authoring articles. Packard, I'm really grateful to you for sharing your time and expertise for this interview where we are focusing on the challenges and benefits for pastors. Through your work, you have had some special insight into the challenges that they face when looking for that other job. So we're going to be talking about that some too. Let's begin just by you telling us how you became interested in bivocational ministry.
It's, as I've said earlier, Kris, it's really kind of a combination of necessity and born out of opportunity as well. When I graduated from seminary, about all that was available to me was pulpit ministry, and I wasn't interested in that. So I went into community organizing as an activist, but having a young family, that didn't pay that much. So I went into the field of training and development in the corporate sector. But unfortunately, at the timing or in the tenor of the times when I did that, I promptly went through 6 companies in about a 10-year period. All of them collapsed, all of them folded. So there was a lot of downsizing going on. And in each instance, they sent me to a quote unquote, a placement consulting group to learn, well, how do you look for work? So I started all that time and kind of, working the streets, looking, learning how to find good gainful employment. And concurrent with this, I also took a step into becoming a dual careerist. And that besides working in training and development, as you said in my introduction, I also took a step aside into the area of executive placement. So I was working both at the same time. And while I was doing that, I was approached by my church to start providing career programs for the other parishioners who are also struggling with trying to find work. And so I put together several programs, and the word spread. So other churches asked me to come in and do the same thing for their congregational members. And about the same time as all of this, my alma mater, Iliff School of Theology, approached me. The dean asked me, would you come in and create a career center for us? So I did that. And then I started getting some inquiry from a lot of alumni from Iliff that had stepped into bivocational ministry. And so the word spread that if you wanted to know more about bivocation, go to Iliff. They've got some character in there, who knows what he's doing. And so pretty soon other denominations like the Lutherans, the Methodists, they started sending bivocational pastors. And so that's how I got into it. It really came to me. I consider it a really blessing. I have a great time with the pastors in the schools that I work with. And so it has become my mission and my ministry. I'm sorry it took so long to explain that, but that's kind of the roots of the passion that I have.
Oh, that's great. It's great to hear your story. It's always interesting to hear how people get where they are,
Yes.
So what opportunities have you noticed in your experience that having other employment provides to these pastors?
Well, let me talk about, first of all, when I'm talking with pastors that are looking into that secondary market, the couple of things that I initially stress with them is, first of all, having gone through a theological education, they have a plethora of skills and abilities that are highly marketable, highly desirable by, the different fields, the different industries, healthcare, nonprofit, even the corporate world. And due to COVID, a lot of companies had to cut back on their personal inventory or personnel inventory. And so now that that's subsided a little bit, is that they're starting to staff up. And if you've been paying attention to some of the surveys out of Gallup or Indeed or Deloitte, consulting group, is that so many of these companies now are looking for people with quote unquote soft skills. They really have excellent interpersonal skills. They know about cultures. They know what motivates a workforce. And so they are becoming highly desirable. So one of the things, that I really stress with a lot of pastors considering that secondary market is, first of all, realize you are highly marketable. Your skills are really highly desirable. A couple of things that come to mind when we look at opportunity is that it is one where people can acquire, that pastors can acquire new skills and new abilities, where, something that gives them opportunity to dive in and acquire a new talent, get some new knowledge sets, get some new basic skills under their belt. And it's something that it presents an opportunity for them really to expand their ability to provide service, to another entity. Let me cite an example. As one of the pastors I was working with needed to get into a part-time setting, and his wife said, well, there's a staffing agency that's in the building right next door, go talk to them. So he went and talked to them, and they said, well, we understand that one of the major automakers is coming out with a new warranty product, and they're looking for salespeople. And Cliff said, well, I've never, the last time I sold anything was, door-to-door dictionaries when I was in seminary, And so he went and talked to them, and they said, well, this is the type of what they call consultative phone sales, where the calls are already coming in for people that are interested in the product. So Cliff stepped into it, and it was amazing because, he had excellent relational skills and abilities, but here he was learning about this new sales concept. And in the first week, he set a record for the most sales within a given day. And it turned out he was the #1 producer for 18 straight months. So it was an eye opener for him. But anyway, that's an instance, where they can acquire new skills. Another opportunity is to hone the skills that you have. And a lot of pastors step into situations like in project management or in administration or in teaching, and they're able to extend those skills into new venues and new environments, and they continue to hone that skill, maybe with a different workforce or a different set of audiences, but it's still the same skill, and they can expand its diversity in a sense, or its impact. Another opportunity, and I've had a number of pastors use this, as they say, going to a different venue is an opportunity to extend their ministry to where they can reach out and extend their ability for pastoral care or counseling, to those situations. And, I'm reminded one of my pastor clients here in Denver decided to become a Uber driver on the side. And he said, picking up people from the airport, very often people, when they're traveling, they're having some difficulties, or they're going through, some trying times. And he just found that when he had a passenger in his car, that it was an opportune time for him to kind of extend some pastoral care. But those are kind of the three areas, that come to mind. And another opportunity is to take advantage of ideas and practices in one setting and applying them in another setting. I call it cross-pollination, in that you'd be surprised that pastors, because they're so skilled and so knowledgeable at different things, that very often that opportunity presents itself, that they're able to take a concept or a practice maybe that they have within their congregation, and they're going into a second work setting where they can apply it and it fits right in like hand in glove. So in the long answer to your question, yes, that's what comes to mind. Okay, unmute yourself, Kris.
Yeah, that's a skill I need to improve, is unmuting myself. Anyway, what I was just saying was a lot of these questions have long and meandering answers when we really think about them. What I hear you saying is that the secondary position, the job outside the congregation, can help pastors hone their skills.
Yes.
And I'm sure that the reverse is true too. You have that job that helps you hone skills that you use in your pastorate.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it gives you these new venues where you can take your ministry. And it reminded me of something I heard in my interviews, and I think this is similar to what you're talking about with the cross-pollination, is some of the lay leaders in my interviews have said that they hear things in the sermons and in the teachings of their pastors that have come from their experience outside the church.
Oh, yes.
So I think,
yes.
Yeah, it enriches pastors in those different ways. Another thing we were going to talk about as we were talking about this interview is that you've observed some challenges that ministers face when they go out and look for that other position. What are some of those?
What comes to mind immediately is when a pastor, they need to look for that secondary job. Very often they kind of bump into a self-criticism, and they say, I don't have the skills necessarily, to do anything other than just become a pastor. And I often, in my counseling or coaching, with pastors, is going back to what I said when I answered the first question. Realize that you've got a stockpile of really excellent skills and abilities. So the initial part of meeting that challenge is recognizing that, again, they've got skills that are really, and education and experience that are highly marketable, highly desirable. Another challenge is that they need to practice or recognize that there is a way to uncover job opportunities where really none exist. And so many of the pastors that I work with, their initial, foray, you might say, into the secondary job market is, go online, look at what's available in Indeed or Career Builder and so forth. Well, they've got to realize that they're among thousands that are looking for those job openings. So one of the challenges is learning how to uncover job opportunities where none necessarily are posted. And I cite the example of one pastor I worked with who had a background in teaching high-tech users around their equipment. And he even used this when he went through seminary, when he got a congregation and he was looking for some part-time work. He kept his eye on this one company that really interested in, because they did have a training department for high-tech employees and so forth, but there was nothing available at the time. But he just kept his eye on the news releases around this company. And these were internal emails to all employees that they put on their Facebook page and stuff like that. And he read that they acquired a great big new client. And he knew if they got that new client, they're going to be needing to train people on how to manage the data flow and the input from that client. So he recontacted the training director and said, I just saw this and I'm just wondering if it might be opportunity for us to talk about how you can support, your employees with this new client. And the guy said, wow, your timing is really great, because we're starting to staff up. So he stepped into a part-time job where he was able to train a lot of these users, and their new computers and so forth. So that's an example. is uncovering job opportunities. And, and I think another challenge that these pastors, these bi-vocational, excuse me, get my tangled up when I get my words mixed, so sorry. But anyway, is that they need to learn how to describe their achievements in a way that captivates the attention of the listener. And I'm I'm an advocate of learning how to use the skill of storytelling. And there's a particular model that I use, but there's plenty out there. But if you can relate your achievements and successes in the framework or the narrative of a story, there are two things that happen. One is the listener remembers the story 20 minutes after the conversation. Secondarily, they remember you. They remember the pastor. And the second thing that they need to really do to meet this challenge is they need to translate that into, because they have these skills, this is where they can contribute. This is where they can add value. So the challenge that they face is they learn how to tell compelling stories about their successes. Secondarily, to make sure that the potential employer understands where they can contribute, where they can add value. And the other challenge that I work with consistently with pastors is negotiating the offer, negotiating the employment contract, or the arrangement around that secondary employment. I came across a survey that was done several years ago from the Mennonite Church, and they interviewed something like about, I think, 100 pastors and asked, have you ever asked, for some additional, stipulations within your contract or so forth? And 67% of them said no, they just accepted what was really offered. And what I stress with them is, just because you want to change the arrangement or the parameters of that situation doesn't mean you're being offensive, and it's very fair game. So that's a real challenge, is to learn how to negotiate the expectations, the salary, the hours. And I can tell you right now that a lot of them, whether it's in the secondary workforce environment or with their congregation, they're going to continue to have to revisit those expectations and make sure that they really, honor those boundaries, if I can say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those job expectations are something that you and I have talked about in other conversations we've had prior to this. And I remember there was one person I spoke with several years ago who was he was already a pastor and then looking for that second job. And they had a Sunday morning job slot requirement. Mm-hmm. And what that caused him to do is go back to the congregation and talk about, okay, how would we work this? If I took this job, how would we work this? Yes. And the congregation changed the time of its worship. Really? It was a smaller congregation, but they cared about their pastor. They knew that they weren't paying him enough to live off of, so they understood why he was looking for that other position. And they adjusted the Sunday morning worship time so that he could go work this other job and then come over to the church.
Oh, that's great.
That one really clarified for me that sometimes those other positions have job expectations that might really clash or butt up against church expectations. So yes, they're going to have to work that out with their through a conversation with both employers, really, the church and the other employer.
That's a great story. Absolutely.
Another thing we've talked about before is that there are situations where ministers go to congregations and both the congregation and the minister think that they're going to have compensation of the level that will let them support themselves. Mm-hmm. But then it turns out it's not so.
Yeah.
And so these congregations really are not able to keep up that compensation level. And so that means the minister has to go out and work to find that other position. And I think you've had conversations with ministers who have had this experience. And so what advice can you share and what insights can you share about that?
Yeah, that has happened, unfortunately, frequently with many recently because of COVID with some of the pastors I've been working with. And the first thing I advise is, don't park with resentment. Don't get pejorative around the congregation. If you need to, go find a place to hit a punching bag or, rip sheets or something like that to get out that frustration. But you don't want to personalize it. You don't, they're being as objective as they can, but you don't want to take it out or, and to have some sort of negative attitude around the congregation. The next thing that I strongly recommend is sit down with the decision makers from the congregation that came to that conclusion and nail down the specifics and the details that caused them to take that sort of route, that decision. What I have found is very often with some of this congregational leadership, sometimes it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. There might be something that suddenly unanticipated happens that they say, oh, we've got to cut salary, we've got to cut expenses, and we're going to start with the pastor. And they really haven't thought through necessarily what's required to bring some sort of financial equilibrium, to the congregation. So I always recommend really sit down and get down into the roots as to what led to that decision, so you can get into the details of it. And a lot of the pastors that have done that are surprised that, well, it's not as bad as we first thought. So you want to get down to understanding the specifics that led to that, because it might lead to some ability to maneuver time and salary or hours and salary that they hadn't thought about. And let me cite an example. There was one pastor I was working with who was informed, we've got to cut your hours, got to cut your salary. And the things that I worked on with him was, as best you can, we're going to try to negotiate an arrangement where, for a period of time at least, they can keep you at the level of income that they had agreed upon initially, but allow you hours away from the congregation so you can do a job search. And so we kind of set that up. And it was really pretty clever. What the congregation did was they had some reserves, but they found out, and with his insight as well, that if they changed the contract that they had in cleaning the facility, so they had an outside contract with someone who they changed to come in and do the restrooms and do the kitchen, and then they got a volunteer set of folks to come in and clean the hallways, clean the meeting rooms, clean the offices. And they were able to save enough from that they could add to the reserves, that they could extend their original contract with him for 60 days, but allow him, I think, a reduction of like 5 hours a week so that he could get out and do some job search. So first thing I say is nail down the specifics, come to some agreement as to what are the next steps. Secondly, is that the pastor really needs to have his contacts or the people in the congregation be part of his network, and because they have their own network of contacts, and you never know what's going to come up. But the one thing you want to avoid as a pastor is don't tell people, well, let me know what's out there if you hear of anything. And someone says, well, we have someone who runs a device that needs to, polish floors at a local, convenience store. Oh, that's really using his talent and skills. So it's contingent upon the pastor to make sure that everybody knows what she is looking for, what her skills are, what roles she's looking for. And even have a prepared sheet so that people can take it with them, and educate them on how they can best serve her as a contact. So, help set up informational interviews, keep them posted on developments within companies or venues that they're aware of where there might be a role that opens up. And then the other thing is to realize, yeah, that they have a network of contacts that are vastly beyond just what the individual pastor can have. And the other thing is, I've had pastors do this, incorporate members of the congregation that are willing to be a prayer warrior. I tell people, pastors, and, we always go back to Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plans I have for you. Well, they may not be apparent immediately, but you need to kind of be within that scheme of things. And so I've had pastors had some support and some affirmation by creating a network of prayer warriors and people that would really, serve to kind of supply that support and that affirmation, like going through the job search. So those are kind of some immediate steps when someone has that setback. In fact, I had one pastor said, well, it was a setback, but this program helped me create a comeback. So I thought that was kind of neat.
Well, thanks. I mean, I really like what you're saying about, even though it's a disappointment, it doesn't have to be adversarial. You can find out avenues of financial support that maybe was undiscovered or hidden within the congregation. But also you can set up ways. I love that idea of the congregation allowing paid time for the job search, recognizing that if they aren't able to support the pastor as they originally thought, they can give the person time to look for something. They can pray for the person. They can serve as a source of contacts and networking for the person, because whatever job that pastor is able to find will enable that person, that pastor, to stay with them and continue serving as pastor for the congregation. I love that idea. During COVID-19 here in Kentucky, our governor often said, we're in this together. And I think that's what I hear what you're saying is that they're, even though it's disappointing, they can remain in it together. Okay, our last question is really shifting a little bit. It's thinking about those ministers or seminarians who know they want to be bivocational, and so they're kind of planning ahead and anticipating that they might be in bivocational ministry. What kind of employment do you recommend that they start looking at?
Oh, my word. Well, I think the starting point, Kris, is that they need to take create an understanding of some concrete ideas as to what specifically are their skills and education base and experience that they want to go forward with. And so many, when I initially start working with pastors, I ask them, well, what is it you want to do? And very often the answer that I hear is, well, this is what I've done, and this is what I plan on doing. And I come back and ask, is that what you want to do? And they say, no, that's just what I can do. And so this is an opportunity when you're venturing out into that secondary market. Why not look for something that brings you fulfillment, that affirms you, that makes you use your strengths and abilities? So my first step is just do a self-assessment and make sure that you understand that these are the skills you want to use going forward. And there's plenty of opportunity out there for people, if they just know their particular skills and abilities. And so, but there's, if they're looking into different fields, there's a firm called the National Bureau of Economic Research, which did a lot of research around the effect on the job market from COVID. And it said that, there were some industries like hospitality and food service and so forth that kind of took it on the chin. But it said in their studies that really there was a reallocation of jobs and employment, and that people were able to make a successful transition into other areas like healthcare or nonprofit, or even parts of the manufacturing, especially in high tech. And so those are industries that are really growing. And so that's one of the things that I encourage bivocational pastors is to just do some real quick, easy research on those fields that are expanding, that are growing. And you'll find that there are all sorts of different types of sizes of corporations within those fields that are doing well, that are thriving. And keep in mind that a lot of these companies and organizations are seeking people that have good people skills, that know how to understand, know how to, maneuver their way through different cultures, can perceive different cultures, that are good at customer relations, good at developing donor bases for nonprofits. I had one pastor that she found that she had a really excellent niche in going to nonprofits around fundraising. In her before seminary, in her previous job, she was the grant writer. And so, Letitia, just as soon as she knew that she needed to find part-time work or was looking for it, boy, that was an avenue for her. So you want to look where your strengths can carry you. Also, there's so much that is web-based now that speaks of job opportunities. If you're looking for a position, you can go to TaskRabbit, and these are all web-based. You can go to Google. You can go to Guru. You can go to Fiverr. And these are all web-based portals that advertise job opportunities. When my daughter was getting her master's in London, my son-in-law, because of the British laws and so forth, you can only work so many hours and so forth. He answered an ad from some corporation in Central Europe that was looking for someone to write marketing copy. So that's what Matt stepped into. It was a part-time job, but it was all online, and he was excellent in languages. And so he was able to step in and do that. But also there's opportunity for you to advertise services. There's such a place called OnlyFans, and it's where people can advertise their abilities. I've had pastors that were really good at providing weight loss counseling. Another woman was really good in Pilates and yoga, and so she would videotape her. And YouTube is another example where people can take their particular skills and ability, put it on the web, and they'll get a bevy of subscribers and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunity out there on the web, but again, it comes back to the point: know what skills you want to go forward with, and then get out there and look at the market to see what's available that you can undertake and uncover for yourself.
Great. I know that what I hear weaving through some of that is an awareness of what we know now because of the pandemic too, is that a lot of employment can be done remotely. So if you are a person who's planning ahead to do bivocational ministry, you can look at different areas geographically if you know that some of your other work can be done remotely.
That's a good point. Yeah, let me kind of speak to that as well, because and this was going on before COVID hit, but because COVID hit, it kind of got accelerated. But so many companies are moving towards automation and robotics. And whatever is something that can be solved through a logarithm or something like that, they're kicking it into into robotics and so forth. But along with that is the realization that people can work from remote sites and still do all of their work online and so forth. There was our kids adopted a dog, and from a couple that had moved here, Lakewood. But they worked in the financial offices of a firm in Manhattan, and just decided it's way too expensive in New York. And so she had a family out here in Colorado, so they picked up and moved, and they do all of their work remotely because it's all financial servicing and so forth. And then they take in rescue dogs as well. But yeah, the labor market is really adjusted to allowing that remote work considerably so.
Yeah, whenever I look on Etsy and I see all the cool things that people are creating There are a lot of craft industries and artistic kind of employment opportunities out there
Yes,
for people.
yeah.
Well, this has been great. It's really wonderful to be able to talk to you across the continent of the United States, and to get to explore some of these things, because your experience with bivocational ministry has been really different from the kinds of interviews I did, where a lot of the people were already employed and settled when they became bivocational ministers. So
Yeah.
your experience is really different, and I'm really grateful that you've taken the time to share with me on this for this class. We both have had many conversations in the past. We know that bivocational ministers can be of great helps to congregations
Oh,
as they
absolutely.
face economic challenges and explore different ways of learning to thrive. So thank you very much for
Oh,
helping
my
us
pleasure.
focus on
I've
some of
had
the
a good time.
challenges and some of the intricacies of looking for a job, things that bivocational ministers experience. So,
Well, if I can reiterate one important point, and that is with your viewers, is never sell themselves short. They've got a whole boatload of skills and experience and talent that is highly desirable out there. Believe in yourself and go discover. Yeah.
great. Well, thank you very much.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
Now I'm looking for the record button, how I turn it off. Oh, I see.